Good evening all the students. Welcome back to my YouTube channel Conquest Biology. So in today's class we will learn how exactly carbon dioxide is transported across our body and how exactly it is expelled out of our body via lungs. So in the previous video related to oxyhemoglobin, I already discussed that there are three ways in which carbon dioxide is transported. First, it is transported in the dissolved form in the blood plasma, but in this way it is transported very less, only 7%. Secondly, it is transported as carba-amino compounds like bound to hemoglobin, amino group of hemoglobin. So in that way, and other proteins, in that way it is transported only 23%, by only 23%. And it is mostly transported as bicarbonate ions, and the percentage is 70%. That means 70% of the carbon dioxide is transported in our body in the form of bicarbonate ions. We all are very well versed with the fact that when cellular respiration occurs, in that process carbon dioxide and water are generated within the tissues, within the cells. Now what happens to this carbon dioxide once it has been generated in the cellular respiration? So that's what we will learn. So while discussing, we will also discuss some important phenomenon which take place in our body, like chloride shift, then reverse chloride shift, then Haldane's effect, and also Bohr's effect. So let us discuss that in detail, how exactly the carbon dioxide will be transported and expelled out of our lungs. So now let us understand what happens to the carbon dioxide once it has been generated in the body cell via cellular respiration. So this is systemic capillary walls, this is plasma, right, and these are our red blood cells. Now, once carbon dioxide has been generated in the cell of our body, now it will, because there the concentration of carbon dioxide is very high as compared to our plasma and our RBCs. So, here concentration is higher, so it will move to the lower concentration by simple diffusion. It will reach here, then it will cross the systemic capillary walls. Now it will reach the plasma inside the body. Right? So some of the carbon dioxide will combine carbon dioxide will diffuse through the plasma, and from plasma to inside our red blood cells. Now in the red blood cells, some of the carbon dioxide will react with the oxyhemoglobin. We know that in red blood cells, the concentration of oxygen is high. Like the combined oxygen with hemoglobin is very high. So in the form of, it exists mostly in the form of oxyhemoglobin. So now this carbon dioxide will come inside the RBC and it will displace the oxygen from the hemoglobin and it will combine with hemoglobin. So now it will become carba-amino hemoglobin and oxygen will be released from the hemoglobin. And some of the carbon dioxide coming from the body cell, it will react with the water inside the red blood cells. So this reaction is catalyzed by an enzyme known as carbonic anhydrase. With the help of this enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, the carbon dioxide and water will combine to form carbonic acid. This is H2CO3 is carbonic acid. Now further, the carbonic acid will dissociate into H plus ions and bicarbonate ions, HCO3 negative. Right? So these bicarbonate ions are very high here. Their concentration is very high as compared to plasma. So by simple diffusion, these bicarbonate ions will diffuse out of the red blood cells. Now they will transported to the from plasma. They will be transported to they will reach the pulmonary capillaries. We will understand it later what happens to these bicarbonate ions in the pulmonary capillaries. But for now, we can very easily understand this fact that bicarbonate ions are very high in the RBC. So they will diffuse out of the plasma. Now let me tell you this. What happens to these H plus ions, which are being generated in the red blood cells. So these H plus ions will displace oxygen from the hemoglobin and they will combine with the hemoglobin, forming HbH. And the O2 oxygen which is released from this hemoglobin molecule, it will diffuse out of because it is being generated over here in a large amount. So concentration is higher. So it will simply diffuse out of the hemoglobin and will reach the body cell. We know that in cellular respiration, a lot of carbon dioxide is produced, and since oxygen is utilized during the respiration, the cellular respiration, so the concentration of oxygen is very low in our body's cells. So since here O2 concentration is higher after the displacement of this oxygen from the hemoglobin, so it will, here concentration is higher, so it will obviously move to the lower concentration via simple diffusion, which is a passive process. So this oxygen will enter our body cells. So that's how the cycle will go on. Now once this oxygen has entered the body cell, now it will again be utilized in the cellular respiration. That's how carbon dioxide and oxygen are circulated within our body, from body cells to plasma and from plasma to RBCs and from RBCs to the body cell again. So I hope it is clear. Now we will understand this important phenomena known as chloride shift. Now we are very well versed with the fact that the bicarbonate ion HCO3 negative is leaving this RBC. So now the electrical balance inside the red blood cell will be disturbed because negative ion is going out. So now in order to counter that electrical balance change, the lack of the negative ions, some of the chloride ions from the plasma will move inside the red blood cells. So whatever the loss was of bicarbonate ions will be counterbalanced by the movement of same number of chloride ions. This phenomenon is known as chloride shift. So I hope it is very clear to you how CO2 is transported across our body. Now we will understand how this bicarbonate ion is the carbon dioxide which is bound to this bicarbonate ion is expelled out of our body in the lungs, because this is our all these phenomena are occurring in our systemic capillaries. Now we know that ultimately the bicarbonate ions will move to the pulmonary capillaries. In pulmonary capillaries, exactly the reverse of these phenomena will occur, and CO2 which is combining here will be dissociated and it will be expelled out of our alveoli, which are present in our lungs, and finally it will be expelled out of the body with the help of nostrils. So I hope it is clear. So this video we can understand by looking at all these diagrams that this is the exchange of O2 and CO2 in our systemic capillaries. This is what happens to the carbon dioxide and oxygen and their movement during internal respiration. Now we will understand what happens to the carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonate ions in the external respiration. That's not at all difficult because the phenomena is exactly reverse of what has happened here. So let us understand. But before we proceed further, let us understand what is Haldane's effect. So Haldane's effect says that in the presence of oxygen, less carbon dioxide will bind to the hemoglobin. So that means how much carbon dioxide will bind to the hemoglobin is totally influenced by the presence of oxygen inside the RBC in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Lesser is the amount of oxyhemoglobin, more CO2 will bind to the hemoglobin. That's what is called as Haldane's effect. So now let us understand what happens to the carbon dioxide inside the RBCs. We know that now after the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, now the red blood cell has become deoxygenated. That means now more of the hemoglobin is combined to the carbon dioxide. Now when this red blood cell will reach near pulmonary capillary, what will happen to this to the carbamino hemoglobin, and how exactly carbon dioxide will be dissociated from the hemoglobin inside this deoxygenated RBC, and how it will be expelled out of our body. Now let us understand this. So now in the pulmonary system, like in the pulmonary capillaries, in contrast to the systemic capillary, reverse reactions will occur. Everything is same, but only the arrows will change because exactly the reverse reaction will occur. Now here the bicarbonate ions are less, so now they will enter the red blood cell. Now we know that in the body tissues near alveoli, the tissues have more oxygen and less carbon dioxide because we have inhaled them. We have inhaled the oxygen from the environment through alveoli. So all this is occurring in the alveoli cells. So what will happen is the cells near the alveoli, the oxygen is more. The partial pressure of oxygen is more. So now it will diffuse from the cells to the blood, the plasma, and from plasma it will enter the red blood cells, because in red blood cells at this time oxygen is less, it is deoxygenated. Now oxygen will displace the HPH, like H plus ion from the hemoglobin here. So reverse is occurring. Now it will form HB oxyhemoglobin, and H plus will be released from the hemoglobin. Now the HC bicarbonate ion from the plasma, where it is more, because in the previous discussion we discussed that bicarbonate leaves the RBC and enters the blood plasma. Now from plasma, in the plasma it is more and here it is less, so it will enter the red blood cell. Here, since we already have this H plus, because of the displacement of H plus from the hemoglobin, because more O2 is present in the RBC now, which has diffused from the body cells. So this H plus will combine with bicarbonate ion, and now it will form carbonic acid. Now again the reaction will reverse. Here I have shown the reverse reaction. In the systemic capillaries, like the RBC is near inside the systemic capillaries, carbon dioxide combines with oxygen in the presence of carbonic anhydrase to form carbonic acid, then it gets dissociated into bicarbonate ions and H plus. But exactly the same reaction is reversible. Here now what will happen is HCO3 negative plus H plus will combine to form carbonic acid. Now carbonic acid will dissociate into carbon dioxide and water in the presence of carbonic anhydrous. So now carbon dioxide will be released from here, and also the oxygen will displace the carbon dioxide bind to the hemoglobin also. So in two ways carbon dioxide is being generated. So this carbon dioxide will be more inside the RBCs in the pulmonary capillaries, and because of the more concentration of carbon dioxide, now it will diffuse into the blood plasma via passive process, and it will enter the body cells. Here, because they are near lungs and near alveoli, so O2 is more and carbon dioxide is less. Since here carbon dioxide is less now, so carbon dioxide coming from the RBC will enter these cells. So that's how oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in the pulmonary capillaries. This is external respiration. Now, since this carbon dioxide has reached here in the pulmonary, the cells of pulmonary capillaries, now this carbon dioxide will be expelled out of the body from the alveoli and from nostrils. Subsequently,